Captain Olivia Martinez stood on the training field, her eyes scanning the new recruits lined up in front of her. Most were humans, young men and women ready to serve the United Earth Defense Force, but 7 figures stood out among them. They weren't human. Their bodies had strange shapes, unusual skin, and extra limbs. These were the first alien representatives from the Galactic Confederation to join human military training. 4 of them had shiny scales that changed color in the sunlight. These were the Zelari. They came from planets with low gravity. 2 others were very tall with thick gray skin. The Vrokath, used to breathing air much heavier than Earth's. The last one was small with 6 arms and looked a bit like an octopus that could walk on land. This was Zyrtik, a Quazon from a water planet. The aliens wore the same green and brown training uniforms as the humans, but theirs had been changed to fit their different bodies. They looked uncomfortable and out of place. Lieutenant Alex Hudson walked up to Martinez and handed her a tablet. "I've read their files," he said quietly. "These aliens are from elite military units in their own worlds, but they're not built for Earth conditions. The Zelari will struggle with our gravity. The Vrokath might have breathing problems, and the Quazon? It's basically a fish trying to be a soldier on land." Martinez took the tablet and looked through the information quickly. "Ambassador Delgado believes this exchange program will build trust between Earth and the Confederation," she said. "After we fought off the hive ships last year, the aliens want to know how we did it. They want to learn our methods. They won't last a week in our training program," Hudson said with a frown. Martinez smiled slightly. "Then we'll help them adapt. But we won't make it easier. That's not why they're here. They need to understand how humans train, not get a watered-down version." She walked to the front of the group. The humans stood straight, eyes forward. The aliens tried to copy them but moved awkwardly, as if the poses were unnatural. "Welcome to Camp Edwards," Martinez said loudly so everyone could hear. "I am Captain Martinez. For the next 12 weeks you will undergo the most intense training program in the United Earth Defense Force. You will push your bodies and minds beyond what you think is possible. You will learn to fight, survive, and win in any environment, on land, in water, in space, and in situations you cannot even imagine yet." She paused and looked at the aliens directly. "To our Confederation guests, I understand you have different physical abilities than humans. We have adapted some equipment for you, but the standards remain the same. You will be expected to complete every task. How you do it may differ, but you must finish." In the back of the training field, several alien officials watched. They wore elegant uniforms with many badges and symbols. One of them whispered to another and laughed softly. Martinez noticed this but continued her speech. "Training begins at 500 tomorrow. Your first test is a 10-mile run, followed by obstacle course completion. After lunch, we start combat training. Your quarters are in Building C. Sergeant Rodriguez will show you there now." Dismissed. As the recruits moved away, Martinez watched the aliens carefully. They moved with confidence, talking among themselves. One of the tall Vrokath said something that made the others laugh. They clearly didn't believe human training would be difficult for them. Later that evening, Martinez met with Ambassador Frank Delgado in her office. The ambassador was an older man with gray hair and a friendly face that hid a sharp mind. "How are our visitors settling in?" he asked. "They're confident," Martinez replied. "Too confident. They think because they come from advanced civilizations, with better technology, that our training will be primitive and easy." Delgado nodded. "That's exactly what their military leaders think too. The Confederation has been in space for thousands of years. They see us as newcomers, barely out of our cradle. Our victory against the Hive surprised them. They can't understand how we won with our simple ships and weapons. They're about to learn that humanity's strength isn't in our technology," Martinez said. "It's in how we prepare our people. It's in our ability to keep fighting when everything else fails. That's why this program matters," Delgado agreed. "The Confederation relies too much on their specialized evolutionary advantages and advanced technology. Each species is very good at one thing, but fails when taken out of their comfort zone. Humans are adaptable. We can function in almost any environment, even if we're not the best in any single one." Martinez looked at the training schedule on her wall. Week 3 will be the breaking point. That's when we begin environmental stress training, cold weather survival, high-altitude operations, underwater combat. I expect at least half the aliens will want to quit by then. But you won't let them? Delgado asked with a small smile. Of course not, Martinez said. They need to understand that the worst day in training is better than the best day in a real battle. We train this hard so we can survive when everything goes wrong. The next morning at exactly 0500, Martinez stood in the dark training field as the recruits assembled. The human recruits arrived first, alert despite the early hour. The aliens came a few minutes later, still adjusting their uniforms. The small Quaison, Zirtik, looked especially uncomfortable in the cool morning air. Today we start with a simple test of endurance, Martinez announced. 10 miles through the forest trail, full gear weight of 40 pounds. Completion time expectation is 90 minutes. One of the Zilari with blue-green scales raised a hand. Captain, our normal gravity is 0.6 of Earth's. Carrying this weight for that distance might cause physical damage to our bone structure. Martinez nodded. Your medical profiles have been reviewed, Recruit Vila. The weights have been adjusted for each species based on your physiological data. You carry 24 pounds, the Vrokath carry 60, and Recruit Zirtik carries 18. The course remains the same for everyone. The alien observers at the edge of the field looked concerned. One stepped forward to speak, but Ambassador Delgado gently stopped him. Let them begin, Delgado said quietly. This is why they're here. To experience, not to observe. As the sun began to rise over the trees, Martinez blew her whistle. The recruits began to run, humans and aliens together, into the forest. The alien observers watched with interest as their representatives moved with confidence at the front of the pack. Martinez checked her watch and smiled to herself. They start strong, she said to Lieutenant Hudson, who stood beside her. But they don't understand what's coming. By mile 3, they'll learn the first lesson about human training. What's that? Hudson asked. That we don't train for the beginning of a fight, Martinez replied. We train for the end, when everyone is tired, hurt, and wants to stop. That's when humans keep going. Let's see if they can do the same. In the forest, the sound of running feet faded as the recruits disappeared among the trees. The real training had begun. 3 weeks into training, the morning sun beat down on the recruits as they ran their daily 10-mile course. The human recruits moved steadily, their bodies now used to the routine. The aliens struggled behind them. Vila, one of the Zilari, breathed hard as she pushed herself forward. Her scales had lost their bright color and looked dull in the sunlight. Specialist Greg Palmer ran beside her, watching carefully. He had been assigned to monitor the aliens' progress. Suddenly, Vila stumbled and fell to the ground. Her breathing came in short, painful gasps as her body fought against Earth's gravity and oxygen levels. Medic, Palmer called. 2 medical staff ran over with equipment. They quickly placed a breathing mask over Vila's face. The mask hissed as it pushed a special mix of gases into her lungs. The alien observers who followed the training in small vehicles rushed forward. This is too much, one of them said. The Zilari respiratory system cannot handle this stress. She must be removed from training. Captain Martinez walked over calmly. Recruit Vila will have 5 minutes with breathing support. Then she will rejoin formation and complete the course. That is not possible, the alien observer argued. Her oxygen-binding cells are different from humans. This could cause permanent damage. The medical team has adjusted the mix for her biology, Martinez replied, and our scans show she is within safety limits even if uncomfortable. She looked down at Vila. This training isn't about being comfortable. It's about finding your limits and pushing past them. Vila's breathing steadied. She removed the mask herself and struggled to her feet. I will continue, she said, her voice rough but determined. Later that day, the recruits faced the obstacle course. They had to climb ropes, crawl under barbed wire, swing across mud pits, and scale high walls. The course was designed to test every muscle group and force recruits to help each other. Zyrtik, the six-armed Quazon, surprised everyone. His multiple limbs allowed him to climb the ropes faster than any human. He swung from one obstacle to the next with unexpected grace for a water-dwelling species. "Look at that," Lieutenant Hudson said to Martinez as they watched. "Maybe we underestimated him." "Wait for the water training," Martinez replied. "That's coming next." In the afternoon, the recruits moved to the pool area. They had to swim in full combat gear, retrieve objects from the bottom, and perform rescue operations. Everyone expected Zyrtik to excel here. His species lived in oceans after all. But when he entered the water wearing combat boots, helmet, and carrying a training rifle, Zyrtik sank like a stone. He thrashed around, unable to swim properly with the gear weighing him down. His 6 arms, so useful on the climbing course, now moved in confusing patterns that worked against each other. Sergeant Diane Rodriguez jumped in and helped him to the surface. "Your natural swimming style doesn't work with gear," she explained. "You need to learn human swimming techniques. Forget what you know from your homeworld." The 2 massive Vrokath warriors, Grun and Talak, had their own problems. In the morning weight training session, they easily lifted twice what the humans could. Their thick bodies were incredibly strong, but when Rodriguez made them run again after lifting, they quickly became exhausted. "Our warriors train for power," Grun explained between heavy breaths. "Quick battles, not long fights." "And if the quick battle becomes a long fight?" Rodriguez asked. "What then?" Grun had no answer. That evening in the mess hall, Palmer sat with the aliens as they ate their special food. The humans had regular military meals, but the aliens needed custom diets to match their different biology. Vila picked at her food, still breathing with effort after the day's training. "I don't understand," she said to Palmer. "On my world, we have advanced combat simulators. We can train for any situation without this physical strain. Why do humans insist on this primitive approach?" Palmer looked up from his meal. "How many real battles have you fought in, Vila?" "3 major engagements," she answered with pride. "I am an elite squad leader." "And did those battles go exactly as your simulations predicted?" Palmer asked. Vila was quiet for a moment. "No," she finally admitted. "The enemy's tactics were unexpected. We had to adapt." "That's why we train this way," Palmer said. "Technology fails. Plans go wrong. But your body and mind? If you train them right, they won't let you down when everything else does." Zyrtik joined the conversation. "Today I failed in the water. This makes no sense. Water is my natural environment." Sergeant Rodriguez, who was passing by, stopped at their table. "Your natural environment is your home ocean, not a combat zone. With 40 pounds of gear, there's a difference." At another table, the alien observers talked quietly with Ambassador Delgado. "These training methods seem designed for humans," one observer said. "Our species have different strengths and weaknesses. This appears inefficient." Delgado smiled. "That's the point you're missing. Human training isn't about playing to strengths. It's about eliminating weaknesses. We don't want soldiers who are excellent in perfect conditions. We want soldiers who can function in the worst conditions." The next day brought a new challenge. The gas chamber. Recruits had to enter a room filled with tear gas, remove their masks, state their names and numbers, and then put their masks back on. The exercise taught them to trust their equipment and control fear. The human recruits dreaded this exercise but knew what to expect. The aliens were terrified. "Our respiratory systems are different," Krell, another Zalari, protested. "This gas might affect us differently." "The chemical has been analyzed and adjusted for each species," Martinez assured them. "It will be uncomfortable, but not dangerous." Inside the chamber, the humans went first, showing the aliens the procedure. When Talak the Vrokath's turn came, he entered confidently, but when he removed his mask, the gas hit his sensitive breathing membranes much harder than expected. He panicked and tried to run out. Instructor Joe Bennett blocked his way. "Complete the exercise, recruit," he ordered. "Name and number." Talak fought through the burning sensation. "Talak, Vrokath Special Forces, ID 27890. he gasped. Then, he put his mask back on and breathed deeply. Outside, Talak was angry. You said it was adjusted for our biology. It was, Martinez replied calmly. But adjusted doesn't mean comfortable. It means survivable. You survived, and now you know you can. By the end of the 3rd week, each alien recruit had reached what they believed was their physical limit. Their bodies were not built for this kind of training, but slowly, they began to understand that human training wasn't just about physical ability. It was about the mind refusing to accept limits. In her office, Martinez reviewed the progress reports with Hudson. They're adapting better than I expected, Hudson admitted. Especially the Quaison. Zyrtic has figured out how to use his multiple limbs to solve problems in ways humans can't. Good, Martinez nodded. Because next week is wilderness survival. That's when they'll learn what human training is really about. Outside, the sun set over the training grounds as the recruits cleaned their equipment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new pain, and new lessons about why human training was so extreme and so effective. Week 5 of training began with the recruits being loaded onto a transport helicopter. Each person carried a backpack with basic survival tools: a knife, rope, fire starter, water purifier, and a small first aid kit. Nothing else. No food. No tents. No communication devices. Captain Martinez stood at the front of the helicopter as it rose into the air. Wilderness survival phase begins now, she shouted over the noise of the engines. You will be dropped in teams of 4 in the Rocky Mountains. Each team has coordinates for an extraction point. You have 5 days to reach it. During this time, you will face weather challenges, simulated enemy encounters, and survival situations. This is not a race. This is about working together to overcome problems. The aliens looked at each other nervously. This was very different from their military training back home. Talak, the large Vrokath warrior, raised his hand. What about food and shelter, he asked. You find it or you make it, Martinez answered simply. The forest has everything you need if you know how to use it. The teams were mixed, humans and aliens together. Martinez had carefully selected the groups to balance strengths and weaknesses. Talak was placed with Kevin Ortiz, a junior recruit, from New Mexico who had grown up camping and hiking in rough terrain. The helicopter landed in a small clearing. Talak's team stepped out, and the helicopter quickly took off again, leaving them surrounded by tall pine trees and mountains. The air was thin and cold. Dark clouds gathered above them, promising rain. We should start moving, Ortiz said, checking his compass. Extraction point is 15 miles northeast of here. We need to cover at least 5 miles before dark. Talak looked around, uncomfortable in the wild setting. On his homeworld, military exercises took place in controlled environments with advanced technology. This felt primitive and dangerous. The team began hiking through the forest. After an hour, rain started to fall. It was light at first, then became heavier, soaking through their clothes. The temperature dropped quickly. Talak's large body began to shiver. We need shelter, he said. We will freeze in these conditions. Ortiz nodded. Let's find a good spot to build something. They found a small overhang of rock that provided some protection. Ortiz quickly gathered branches and showed the others how to create a simple lean-to shelter. Inside, they were protected from the rain but still cold. We need fire, Ortiz said, pulling out his fire starter. He gathered dry materials from under fallen logs and carefully built a small fire near the entrance of their shelter. The flames grew, bringing welcome warmth. Talak watched with interest. In my military, we would call for extraction in these conditions, he admitted, or use emergency shelter technology. What happens when technology fails? Ortiz asked. What happens? When extraction isn't possible? Talak had no answer. On his world, they always had technology, always had backup. The idea of being truly on their own was foreign. The next morning, they continued their journey. The rain had stopped, but the ground was muddy and slippery. As they crossed a small stream, one of their team members slipped on wet rocks and fell, twisting his ankle. I can't walk properly, he said, wincing in pain. Ortiz examined the injury. It's not broken, just sprained. But we need to wrap it. He used items from the first aid kit to create a support for the ankle. The alien observers, who followed the teams at a distance to ensure safety, approached. "This recruit should be removed from the exercise," one of them said. "He cannot continue with this injury." Ortiz looked up. "In real combat, we don't always have that option. We adapt and keep moving." He turned to his injured teammate. "We'll make you a walking stick. You lean on it and on us when needed. We move slower, but we all reach the extraction point together." The alien observers looked confused but stepped back. This was not how their military would handle such a situation. That night, as they made camp, Talak helped Ortiz treat the injured ankle again. The Vrokath was strong, able to gather large pieces of wood for their shelter and fire with ease. "Your training creates soldiers who can do many things," Talak observed as he watched Ortiz make a tea from pine needles that would help with pain. "Our warriors specialize. We have medical units for healing, engineering units for building, combat units for fighting. Specialization works until someone gets killed," Ortiz replied. "What happens when your medical unit is wiped out? Can your combat units treat their own wounds?" Talak thought about this. "No," he admitted. "They would wait for replacement medical units." "And if they're not coming?" Ortiz asked. Again, Talak had no answer. On the third day, they faced a simulated enemy attack. Drones flew overhead, marking them with laser tags that indicated simulated weapons fire. They had to take cover and return fire with their training weapons. During the exchange, Ortiz was hit in the leg. According to the simulation rules, this meant he had a serious wound that limited his mobility. The alien observers appeared again, ready to remove him from the exercise. "No," Ortiz said firmly. "I can continue." He showed Talak how to create a field bandage and makeshift crutch from materials in the forest. Then he continued leading the team, despite his simulated injury. That night, Talak finally understood. "You train to survive when everything goes wrong," he said to Ortiz as they sat by their fire. "Not just to win when things go right." Ortiz nodded. "Exactly. Human history is full of battles that were won not by the side with better weapons or more troops, but by the side that could endure more suffering, adapt to worse conditions, and keep fighting when anyone else would have given up." On the fourth day, they reached a steep cliff that blocked their path to the extraction point. They needed to climb up or go around, adding many miles to their journey. "We climb," Ortiz decided. He showed them how to create simple climbing aids from their rope and natural handholds in the rock face. It was slow, difficult work, especially with one injured team member. But they worked together, finding a path up the cliff. At the top, they could see the extraction point in the distance, a clearing where a helicopter would pick them up the next day. They had made it through the wilderness survival phase. As they set up their final camp, Talak looked at Ortiz with new respect. "I have fought in 3 wars," the Vrokath said. "I have led elite units in space combat. But I have never been tested like this." Ortiz smiled. "This is just training. The real test comes when lives depend on what you learned here." In the distance, the alien observers watched through binoculars. One turned to another. "They are not just teaching combat skills," he said with surprise. "They are teaching a way of thinking about problems, a way of never giving up." The other nodded. "Perhaps this is why humans defeated the Hive when our forces could not. They don't rely on technology or natural advantages. They rely on themselves." As night fell over the mountains, the recruits slept under the stars. Tomorrow they would return to base camp, having learned important lessons about human training and about themselves. Week 8 of training took the recruits to the orbital station simulator. This large structure looked like a real space station but stayed on Earth. It had all the same systems and challenges of a real station: airlocks, zero-gravity rooms, life support systems, and emergency protocols. Chief Samantha Wright led the training. She was a tall woman with short gray hair who had served on real space stations for 15 years. "Space is the most dangerous environment humans operate in," she told the recruits as they stood in the main entrance. "There is no room for error. One mistake can kill everyone." The aliens looked more confident here, Space was something they understood well. Their civilizations had been traveling among the stars for thousands of years. This part of training, they thought, would be easy for them. Today we practice emergency responses, Wright continued. You will divide into teams and handle different problems: air leaks, power failures, fire, and system malfunctions. Each team must solve their problem within the time limit. Zirtik, the six-armed Quaison, was placed in a team with two humans, Jason Miller and Nicole Garcia. Their task was to repair a damaged air filtration system. This was the kind of technical work Zirtik was good at. His multiple limbs could hold several tools at once. I have maintained life support systems on deep space vessels, Zirtik told his human teammates. This will be simple. The teams entered the simulator. Each went to their assigned section to begin their tasks. Zirtik's team reached the air filtration room and began work. Wright watched from a control room where she could monitor all teams and add unexpected problems if they were doing too well. Suddenly, red lights flashed throughout the station. A loud alarm sounded. This was not part of the planned exercise. Emergency in Section 4, a voice said over the speakers. Pressure drop detected. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Wright checked her monitors with alarm. A real system failure had occurred in the training module. A seal had broken in Section 4, causing a dangerous drop in air pressure. 3 recruits were trapped there, 2 humans and Zirtik. The alien observers rushed to the control room. Abort the exercise, one demanded. Get them out now. The 2 safety doors have already sealed automatically, Wright said, her voice tense. We can't open them until pressure stabilizes, or we risk depressurizing more sections. They need to fix it from inside or get to emergency suits. Inside Section 4, warning lights flashed as air hissed out through a damaged wall panel. The pressure was dropping fast. Soon the air would be too thin to breathe. Emergency suits, Miller said, pointing to a wall cabinet. But when they opened it, they found only 2 suits. 3 people were trapped. What do we do? Garcia asked, her voice showing fear for the first time in training. To everyone's surprise, Zirtik took charge. You 2 put on the suits, he said calmly. My species can survive low oxygen conditions longer than humans. I will fix the leak. But you need tools from outside this section, Miller protested. Then we improvise, Zirtik replied. He looked around the room, seeing things differently than he had before. This was not like any emergency drill he had done on his homeworld. There, they had proper tools and backup systems. Here, they had only what was in the room and their own skills. Zirtik moved to a control panel and began rewiring it. Garcia removed the cover from that ventilation duct, he ordered. Miller, I need the inner seal from your emergency suit repair kit. The humans quickly did as he asked. They had never seen the alien move with such confidence. His 6 arms worked, on different tasks at once. Rerouting power, cutting wires, connecting circuits. What are you doing? Garcia asked as she handed him the duct cover. Creating a bypass system, Zirtik explained. We cannot fix the leak directly, but we can isolate this section and reroute life support through secondary channels. In the control room, Wright and the observers watched in amazement. What Zirtik was doing wasn't in any training manual. He was combining human emergency procedures with his own knowledge in a way no one had seen before. If this works, one observer whispered, it changes everything we thought about cross-species training. After 10 tense minutes, the alarm stopped. The pressure stabilized. Zirtik had successfully created a temporary fix that would hold until the main doors could be safely opened. When the 3 were finally released from the section, Admiral Carlos Vega was waiting. He had come to observe the final phases of training. The Admiral was a serious man with a weathered face who rarely smiled. Explain what you did in there, he said to Zirtik. The alien stood straight, still breathing hard from the stress. I combined the emergency bypass procedure from Instructor Wright's training with a technique we use for underwater habitat maintenance on my homeworld. But you never practiced that specific scenario, Vega noted. No, sir, Zirtik agreed. But Instructor Wright taught us to understand the principles behind the procedures, not just to memorize steps. I applied those principles to create a solution. Vega nodded slowly. That is exactly what we hoped would happen with this program. Later that evening, Captain Martinez met with the Confederation military liaison, a senior officer named Jorex. Today's incident showed something important, Martinez said. Zyrtik didn't just use his training, he adapted it to an unexpected situation. That's what human training focuses on. Jorex nodded thoughtfully. Our military training emphasizes mastery of specific scenarios. We run thousands of simulations for every possible problem. But what about impossible problems? Martinez asked. What about situations your simulations never predicted? Those are rare, Jorex said, but he sounded less certain now. Are they? Martinez opened a file on her tablet. The Hive uses unpredictability as a weapon. They deliberately create situations your training hasn't covered. That's why they were so effective against your forces. Jorex was silent for a moment. And humans? We evolved as generalists, Martinez explained. We're not the strongest, fastest, or naturally adapted to any specific environment. We can survive almost anywhere because we've always had to adapt rather than rely on specialized advantages. Like our training, Jorex realized. We focus on using our natural evolutionary advantages. You focus on overcoming your natural limitations. Exactly, Martinez agreed. And that's what makes human training so extreme and so valuable. Outside the station simulator, Zyrtik sat with Miller and Garcia. The three had formed a bond through their shared emergency. On my world, Zyrtik said, I would have waited for the specialist repair team. I would have followed exact procedures. And today? Garcia asked. Today I learned that sometimes there are no specialists coming. Sometimes the exact procedure doesn't exist. Zyrtik's voice had changed. He sounded different, more confident, more flexible in his thinking. Miller smiled. Welcome to human training. 12 weeks after they began, the training program was finally ending. The graduation ceremony was held on the same field where the recruits had first assembled. 4 of the 7 alien recruits stood proudly in formation with their human teammates. Vila and Krell from the Zalari, Grun from the Vrokath, and Zyrtik the Quazon had completed the full program. The other 3 aliens had been sent home due to injuries or inability to adapt to Earth conditions. The ceremony was simple. No fancy lights or technology displays like the ones used in Confederation military graduations. Just the recruits standing, in neat rows, their uniforms clean but showing signs of hard use. Their bodies were stronger now, their eyes more confident. Captain Martinez walked down the line, inspecting each recruit one last time. When she reached Vila, she paused. The Zalari scales had regained their bright color, and she stood straight despite Earth's heavy gravity. 12 weeks ago you could barely complete a run without help, Martinez said. Now look at you. Vila nodded. I remember thinking this training was primitive. I was wrong. Martinez continued down the line. She stopped in front of Zyrtik. The small alien with 6 arms had surprised everyone with his ability to adapt to land training, despite coming from a water world. You taught us as much as we taught you, Martinez told him. Zyrtik's skin changed color slightly, showing emotion. What I learned here will save lives when I return home. Ambassador Frank Delgado stepped forward to address the graduates. His formal diplomatic uniform looked out of place among the training gear and simple surroundings. Today marks the end of the first joint training program between Earth and the Galactic Confederation, he said. But it is just the beginning of what we can learn from each other. The Confederation brings thousands of years of space exploration and advanced technology. Earth brings a unique approach to training and adaptation. He looked at the alien recruits. What you take back to your worlds is more than just physical skills. You take a way of thinking, a way of facing challenges that may be new to your people. Later, at the small celebration after the ceremony, Vila approached Captain Martinez with a formal request written on a tablet. What's this? Martinez asked, taking the tablet. A request to stay for advanced training, Vila explained. And eventually, to become an instructor for new Confederation recruits who come here. Martinez looked surprised. That wasn't part of the original program. I know, Vila said. But it should be. When I arrived, I thought human training was primitive because it focused on physical hardship instead of using advanced technology. Now I understand that the difficulty of your training isn't a weakness, it's your greatest strength. Martinez smiled slightly. How so? You train this way not because you must, but because you've learned through your history that being prepared, mentally and physically, can overcome almost any disadvantage, Vila explained. My people have relied on our technology and natural abilities for so long that we've forgotten what it means to push beyond our limits. Across the room, Grun the Vrokath was talking with Lieutenant Hudson. The large alien warrior had lost weight, during training his body becoming leaner and more efficient. In my first battle, our ship lost power, Grun said. Our weapon systems failed. Many warriors panicked because they had never trained without technology. Now I understand why humans spend so much time practicing basic survival skills. Hudson nodded. Technology is a tool, not a crutch. If you depend completely on your tools, what happens when they break? On the observation deck overlooking the training grounds, Admiral Vega stood with the Confederation High Commander, a tall, alien with metallic skin named Zoran. They watched the celebration below. Do you understand now why we insisted on this program? Vega asked. Zoran nodded slowly. Your people prepare for the worst, because you've always had to. We evolved with advantages that made such preparation seem unnecessary, until we met enemies who could target those advantages. Exactly, Vega agreed. And now we can both benefit from what we teach each other. The Admiral's communication device beeped. He looked at it, his face becoming serious. We've just received news from our deep space monitoring stations. An unknown force has been detected approaching Confederation space. Zoran received the same alert on his own device. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our database. What do your tactical simulations predict? Vega asked. They cannot provide a response, Zoran admitted. There is no historical data for this type of encounter. Then this will be a test of adaptation, Vega said, not simulation. Vila had moved closer and overheard the conversation. They'll need what we've learned here, she said with new confidence. Human training no longer seems extreme, it seems essential. Zyrtic joined them, his multiple arms holding a drink and a plate of food. I have been thinking about how to adapt human training methods for water-dwelling species on my homeworld. We have always focused on our strengths in the ocean. Now I see we must also prepare for environments where we are weak. Martinez nodded. That's the thing about being human. We've always trained not just for the threats we know, but for the ones we cannot yet imagine. As the celebration continued, the graduates shared stories and made plans. The human recruits had learned from the aliens too. New ways of thinking, different approaches to problems. Together, they represented something new in the galaxy. A force that combined the best of human adaptability with alien specialized skills. Later that night, Martinez walked alone on the training grounds. The next day, a new group of recruits would arrive, more humans, and thanks to the success of this first class, twice as many aliens from even more species in the Confederation. She thought about how far they had all come. When the aliens first arrived, they saw human training as primitive and unnecessarily difficult. Now they understood that the extreme nature of the training wasn't a limitation. It was humanity's greatest strength. A shooting star crossed the sky above her. Martinez watched it, knowing it might be a natural meteor or perhaps a ship carrying the unknown visitors toward Confederation space. Whatever challenges came next thanks to this program, both humans and aliens would face them better prepared, together. The alliance between Earth and the Galactic Confederation had begun with diplomacy and technology exchange, but its true strength would come from something simpler and more powerful, the lessons learned through sweat, pain, and perseverance on this training field, where aliens discovered why human training was so extreme and so necessary.